So the reason why the irrational beliefs are relevant in OCD recovery is that when we can start changing irrational beliefs into more rational beliefs, it can help us reduce our should beliefs. So I should do this, I should feel this, people should behave this way. And it can help to reduce our awfulizing, as Albert Ellis would put it in his books, Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything and The Myth of Self-Esteem. So awfulizing being when we make something out to be the worst possible thing that could possibly ever happen in our minds, when in fact there are a lot worse things that could happen, or that we could do, or that somebody else could do, aside from the thing that we're afraid of. So these irrational beliefs tend to lead us to awfulizing, which tends to provoke strong negative emotions such as depression and anxiety, and perhaps even rage. And the irrational beliefs that we hold that fuel our anxiety will then cause OCD to latch on to certain topics because we believe it's awful and we want to control the situation and make sure that it doesn't happen, or that it isn't the case, or that if the feared scenario is true, we want to make sure everybody else is safe, or whatever the feared scenario may be. We in some way are trying to stop it happening, or trying to get to the bottom of it, or trying to control it because we think it's terrible and we think it must not happen. And that is the irrational belief there. It's the belief that something is awful and that it must not happen. And that isn't specific to OCD sufferers. But the reason why it's relevant in OCD recovery is because while we have those beliefs that this must not happen, it would be awful, it shouldn't be this way, I shouldn't be that way, we will put up resistance against it, whether that's internally or whether that's doing physical compulsions. We believe that we need to try and stop that being the case. And it plagues us because we have OCD, because the alarm bells are ringing in our mind because of our OCD. It's constantly there making us believe it's true, and we feel like we have to prevent it from being true. So the difference is that people without OCD have these beliefs, but they won't necessarily have the repetitive thoughts that the feared scenario is true. So they will believe that certain things are awful. So for example, a person in a relationship that's very important to them who doesn't have OCD may still believe that it's awful if they break up with their partner, or they may still believe that it would be awful if they were with the wrong partner, but they haven't necessarily had, because they don't have the repetitive thoughts and intrusive feelings and urges, this scenario isn't relevant for them because they're just going along in their relationship that's important to them, that feels good, and that's that. Whereas if you have relationship OCD and you have the same beliefs, it would be awful to lose your partner, or it would be awful to be in the wrong relationship. If we have a thought remotely like that, it might sound the alarm bells in our minds say ring, 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 anxiety, and then we might start suddenly feeling like it is true, and we have to make sure it's not true so we can avoid that being the case. We can make sure we don't, it feels completely real to us, and we want to make sure we don't leave the relationship, or that we're not with the wrong person or whatever. Whereas the person who doesn't have OCD may have had that thought once and been like, okay, they can view it more separate to them because they don't have the extreme anxiety response coming up to it. But that doesn't mean that if they were in that scenario where, that doesn't mean that they don't believe it's awful too, because they may well have those same irrational beliefs that it would be awful. But for those of us with OCD, if we want to not have the repetitions or, the alarm bells ringing in our minds with the repetition of these thoughts, we need to reduce how awful we think these scenarios are. And therefore, we need to work on changing the irrational belief into a new, more realistic, more rational belief. So it would be awful if becomes, it wouldn't be ideal if, but if that was the case, I could handle it.